I'm joined now by reporter Justin Glaw, who's been very much on top of the whole election subversion beat, especially as it relates to Georgia and the Georgia State Election Board. Justin, we now have the first major instance, high-profile instance of misinformation, disinformation coming out of Georgia, and it comes from, surprise, surprise, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I'm going to put her tweet right here on the screen. Her tweet said, "This happened in Whitfield County in my district, Georgia's 14th. We vote on Dominion voting machines. Then it prints a paper ballot with our selections made on the machines. This voter's printed ballot had been changed from their selections made on the machine. Good thing they checked their paper ballot before turning it in. After several attempts of trying to change it to reflect their correct choices, they had to void the ballot and use a different machine. Please double check your printed ballot before you turn it in to make sure it has marked the candidates you voted for." Justin, is this what happened here? Can you explain the reality of this situation?
No, this doesn't appear to be what happened, and that's what Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and election officials in the county confirmed around the same time that Marjorie Taylor Greene was putting this up. What happened was the voter messed up their ballot, and they made some sort of mistake or incorrect selection when they went to choose who they were voting for, and so they got a new ballot then, and then they redid their vote, and then they ended up, being satisfied with their selections. But so Marjorie Taylor Greene then goes on Alex Jones' show and says that the voting machines were switching the votes, right? So she makes it out to be that the machines, are like rigged or whatever, when in fact, really what happened was the voters screwed up their own ballot.
Now, this isn't the only piece of disinformation that she's been perpetuating. There's also this tweet that I'll put on the screen. Disclosed TV just reported that Michigan has 500,000 more voters on their voter rolls than people who are eligible to vote. Michigan says they will purge the voter rolls after the election. If true, this is a wide open door for voter fraud. Can you speak on that claim?
If True's doing a lot of work there. Also, not really sure, I'm not really sure what disclosed TV is, but what I can say is that this comes from this claim of there are more registered voters than there are residents of the state of Michigan is a very popular claim for several what are called list maintenance lawsuits that have been filed by Republicans and right-wing groups. And what's interesting about this lawsuit in particular, which is where this claim comes from that Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted about, is that the RNC filed that lawsuit saying what she said. There are more registered voters than there are residents of the state of Michigan. The Secretary of State of Michigan filed a motion to dismiss that lawsuit in June, and the RNC has yet to respond. And, I wrote a story about this last week that a Harris campaign advisor says there's a reason why they don't respond to these lawsuits, which is that there's really no merit behind them, and they have no real intention of actually getting rid of these voters or fixing this problem because maybe there really isn't a problem, but also because it helps a political narrative that is the exact type of thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene taps into with this post.
I know this isn't exactly what you cover, but there is also the implications here for the prospect of other defamation lawsuits. I mean, Dominion Voting Systems obviously sued successfully Fox News, and they settled for a record $787 million. So is there any legal exposure for Marjorie Taylor Greene in yet again perpetuating these claims that form the basis of previous defamation lawsuits?
She sort of covered herself a little bit afterwards, right? Because she follows up that post saying, oh, they're switching the votes with, oh, it looks like the county has addressed this issue, right? So she sort of she makes an incorrect false claim and then somewhat corrects it a little bit. So probably from a legal perspective, as far as defamation goes, she's covered herself. But what is so interesting about this is that the person who made this mistake to kick it all off, if you read the county's response to it, they're trying to be very generous to the voter. They don't explicitly come out and say the voter screwed up her own ballot, right? What they say is, if a voter makes a mistake, they're able to correct their ballot under Georgia law. If we thought there was a problem with this machine actually changing votes, we would have taken this machine out. But we didn't do that because there wasn't a problem with the machine. The voter screwed up her own ballot.
Well, with that said, so Marjorie Taylor Greene probably has enough lawyers surrounding her, or at least people who are intimately familiar with these lawsuits, that she gave herself enough cover, enough plausible deniability so that she doesn't have legal exposure. But that doesn't mean that the next person who uses her tweet as a primary source isn't going to get themselves in the hot water, because they might not know to give themselves some little out that was put in by some lawyer that was around her, that was looking to protect her from a defamation lawsuit. And so she, in posting this tweet, which, the vast majority of people are going to read this, and the information that they're going to take from it is not that everything is all good in the end, but in fact that there was a problem, and the next person might get into a lot of legal trouble themselves with a litigious company, and it might be Marjorie Taylor Greene's fault because she was the one who aired these claims in the first place.
Right, and also the next person is the 3.5 million people who saw the original post about how the machines were switching the votes, but then didn't see the follow-up post that said, oh, actually it was, voter error, which, again, Marjorie Taylor Greene explicitly say, right? Like, so yes, you're right that somebody else is going to pick up on this and they're potentially going to get sued as a result of it. But, more to the point for me and for what I do is that, like, Marjorie Taylor Greene's first post about this, claiming that machines switch the votes, that is what then goes around the world 80 times before the truth and the facts and the reality of the situation can be impressed upon all the people who saw that lie going around the world quicker than I or anybody else can do anything about it.
And so, more broadly, what do you think is the goal of these Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who will inevitably, and have, in her case, have already started spreading this kind of disinformation? What is the ultimate goal here in this sprint to the bottom to just kind of trick people into thinking that straight up lies are actually what's happening in Georgia and other states?
Yeah, so I mean, to me, this is, when I saw this, I think I told somebody, I said, this is the beginning, right? Like, this is where it really all starts. This is the first high profile. And, let's keep in mind, too, early voting in Georgia started on Tuesday, so a week ago tomorrow. Marjorie Taylor Greene put this post out there on Saturday, right? So, like, she's really on top of it. And what she's on top of is a phenomenon that we're going to see over and over and over again, a phenomenon that is repeated from the 2020 playbook, which is you take a small error or irregularity or, technical snafu, and you make it out to be something that it isn't. In this case, it wasn't even any of those, right? Voting machines can mess up and there can be errors that are not nefarious in nature. This wasn't even that. This was a voter who went to vote for Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and couldn't figure it out, right? But she took that, and then that now becomes evidence of voter fraud, election fraud, whatever you want to call it, right? And so, but like, that's now out in the ecosystem, and the correction to it will never get as much play as the misinformation that started it all.
And the point of this, obviously, is just to be one more proof point out of what they hope will be thousands or millions that they can point to as fraud for if, in the event that Donald Trump loses or they need to cry fraud for whatever reason, they now have, 1,000 different proof points that they can point to and say, well, look, there was, starting on this very moment right here where the Dominion machines were switching votes. And then, they have 10 more to point to from the same day. Like, what they're doing now, it seems to me, is just creating all of these justifications that they will inevitably be able to point to when they inevitably cry fraud if they don't win the election.
Right. And to me, it's very much in line with another thing that from 2020 that's continued onward over the last 4 years, where election denial officials and activists, they try to get all of this like technical materials and records from election offices to pour over to look for evidence of fraud. And really what this has looked like is a bunch of people who don't really know what they're looking at, going through zeros and ones in some giant document, claiming that they've found some secret thing that like nobody else knew about. And this is like, it's almost like somebody who doesn't know how to work on a car, just like opening up the hood and pulling parts off, thinking that they're going to be able to fix it, right? But like the exploitation of this highly technical, detailed material has been used by the election denial movement to claim fraud and that it's hidden in here. And if we just have more records, then we can find it. And it's just like this constant game of whack-a-mole where like you put down one conspiracy and another one comes up because they got some more records, right? And that's what we're going to see going forward too.
Well, look, I think the work that you're doing right now in exposing this stuff is especially important because, like I said, what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing right here is going to serve as the basis for these eventual claims of fraud. And so if people think that they're valid or legitimate, then it's going to be that much more difficult to disprove this bogus notion of fraud when we get past the election. But pointing this stuff out now as we go and showing why what she's saying is complete BS or why it has or why it's illegitimate or just straight up misinformation that's been corrected by the Secretary of State office, which, by the way, is a Republican Secretary of State. I think that will be important as we head toward November, where, again, a big aspect of their strategy here is just going to be taking whatever they can, dressing it up as some nefarious activity, and then using that to point to validate their claims of fraud. So, Justin, where can my viewers learn more from you?
I write a Substack newsletter called American Doom. It's at american-doom.com.
Great, and I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Justin, thanks for the work that you're doing and for taking the time today.
Thank you.